Good afternoon, everyone. A big thank you to you all for joining us today for this discussion about FinTech and more specifically digital payments. I am Jessica Naga, the Managing Director of a law firm, Pan-African, which specializes in FinTech payments and related regulatory aspects. I am joined by captains of industry in the digital payment sphere who will discuss this fascinating and often seen as disruptive area. We have Rahul Jain from Peach Payments, Putty from Save and Remit Services, and Mark O'Sullivan from IPT Africa. So Rahul, we'll start with you. You are the co-founder and CEO of Peach Payments. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about the creation of Peach Payments and the reason why it's called Peach Payments? I'm sure a lot of people want to know that.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. As Jessica said, I'm Rahul. I'm one of the co-founders of Peach Payments. And what we do at Peach is we work with any business that wants to sell a product or service through a digital channel. And we provide them payment solutions to enable them to get paid from the users or from their consumers who are buying that product or service from them. This digital channel could be a website, it could be an app, it could be a call center, email, SMS. And so we provide the payment tools to these businesses, to integrate payments into their websites and into all these different channels. Why we started Peach? So we started Peach back in, 2012. And at that time, when we looked at, the payments landscape in Africa, I think there was a clear need from merchants and businesses for a more modern payment solution that met the needs of their businesses. So if you think about, how user behavior and consumer behavior has evolved across the continent, it wasn't like, businesses didn't have access to payment systems, but what was available was not meeting the needs of this adapting and evolving user behavior. So our vision with Peach was to bring a more modern stack to developers and to businesses in Africa. We started with South Africa and really focused on the South African market, started to grow our business over there. And then over the past 2 to 3 years, we started to look at expanding into the rest of Africa and bring our solutions and adapt them for the local demands of each market. Jessica, you asked an interesting question around why Peach Payments, right? So actually the true story is that we named the business Baobab Payments initially, but half the people couldn't pronounce Baobab and half the people didn't know what a Baobab tree was. And at some point we were like, okay, we need to find a name that is positive. It has no negative connotations in any cultural context, across the continent, because we were very focused on building a Pan-African player from day one, right? And after a long time, we came up with Peach Payments, and it sounded great, and I think it's worked well for us over the years. And yeah, that's how we ended up with the name Peach Payments. And also, we said if Apple can do it, why not us? Let's build a.
That is true. Thank you very much, Rahul. That's a very exciting journey that you've had, and you're now coming into Mauritius. So can you tell us what your plans are for Mauritius, if it's similar, if it's different? I think a lot of people want to know about the reason why you.
Absolutely. So for Mauritius, there's a few reasons why we looked at Mauritius. One, we have a lot of, as we grow across the continent into more countries, we target not only businesses that are selling a product or service locally, i.e., let's say within South African businesses selling to South African consumers, etc. But now we also have merchants who we started working with in South Africa, starting to expand across the continent, right? So we are seeing demand, startups or businesses that we work with in South Africa saying, hey, do you offer something in Kenya? Do you offer something in Mauritius? So we kind of look at countries and we prioritize based on where are we seeing the demand from, and also where do we see opportunity. So Mauritius is an example. Mauritius is a hub for Africa. A lot of African businesses are headquartered out of Mauritius or have a presence there. And we saw a lot of demand from South African businesses and our Kenyan businesses, who wanted to process in Mauritius as well. But we're also seeing a huge opportunity locally. within Mauritius. We see that bringing some of our solutions around, recurring payments or subscriptions, or some of the tools that we've built that work very well for businesses in South Africa and Kenya also have relevance for businesses in Mauritius, and that's why we chose to expand to Mauritius. And our plans, we have to take each country in its own context. We have to understand what is consumer behavior in that country. How do people pay for products and services? What payment methods are they using? And then we need to adapt our platform and our systems to that, right? So we've launched with a basic solution set today. We are now starting to build some of that localization and adaptation into the platform, and that's an ongoing focus from there on. So we continue to make sure that we are not just thinking, oh, this worked in South Africa, so let's take it to Mauritius. No, we kind of take a fresh look and say, what is the problem we're trying to solve in Mauritius for Mauritian businesses or for our global merchants, and how do we solve that?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So I will move on to Putty. Putty, thank you for being here. You are the founder and managing director of a Zambian-based company called Save and Remit. So I will ask you the same question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the creation of your company?
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Putty, like Jessica's already highlighted. I'm the founder and also managing director for Save and Remit, which is a savings and payment platform tailor-made to actually facilitate for the informal sector. So our vision is mainly to impact financial inclusion, also for the unbanked, not only in the Zambian sector, but also Africa at large. So we provide savings components. We've got an inbuilt platform that is downloaded both on Play Store and Apple Store that makes it or gives a simplified way of saving, interest component, interest calculation, statement generation, group statement generation, individual statements, approvals from the accountant, and so on and so forth. So as a value-added proposition to the platform, we then integrated, or rather had the remit aspect also developed to make it easier for the saving groups or cooperatives that are on the platform, as well as the SMEs who use the platform for payments, mainly for their services, for their goods sold. And it is also inbuilt onto the platform. So for all SMEs, the saving groups that are found on our application, they enjoy the benefits of both savings as well as payments, not only locally. They pay using mobile money. The platform is integrated with mobile money payments, Visa payments, as well as bank transfers. So it can be international transfers, it can be Visa payments using your Visa card. You can also pay using mobile payments, all at your disposal on your phone, have all savings administration work also factored in. I didn't speak a little about myself prior to talking about Save and Remit. My main background is banking. I served in the banking industry, both local banks and international banks, for 10 years. And I said goodbye to my banking profession, which seems to have caught up with me, I think a few months or a year after, because again, I've gone back into developing an app that's used by both banking, formal sectors, as well as informal sectors. So in the year 2017, I then embarked on entrepreneurship. And Save and Remit has been my baby, which was officially launched early last year, 2020. And despite the pandemic, we've managed to, the business has thrived, despite it having been a startup. I think it was launched at the right time when the world was, closed up due to the pandemic, because we're now in the digital era, and it helps people trade as well as have their businesses afloat despite not having to be there and trade physically. That's in a nutshell.
I think, Putty, I think it's the right moment for me to just ask you, what do you think is the future of informal banking in Africa, based on what your experience, but also your research and everything on the sector?
Yeah, so on the research that I conducted prior to the launch of Save and Remit, and also after the launch, the future of informal banking is very bright. Informal banking is broad in its perspective. Most people will look at informal banking and thinking it's banking outside the bank, but ideally that's not the concept. Informal banking includes capital markets, includes insurance, it also involves other formal factors. It involves saving groups, both formal and informal. It involves village banking. It's a concept that's been adapted by most of the African settings. I don't know whether it's equally been rolled out in Mauritius, where most people tend to save and enjoy the village banking concept outside the formal banking sector. So it is very bright. It also brings about security for most of the business people, those in the banking sector as well. It's there's been a lot said and done to help everyone in all societies across Africa under financial inclusion. And under financial inclusion, more focus has been placed more on informal banking as opposed to formal banking. We already have everything laid out for us in the banking sector. We have regulators, central banks in different parts, in most parts of Africa that are in the banking sector. But structures have been formed, both under macroeconomics in most countries, microeconomics in most countries, and digital payments taking the lead. Based on the current research that I did, about 68% of most payments in Zambia and also most of the African countries is focusing on digital payments, digital platforms, as well as mobile money. Of course, excluding South Africa, as of now, most of the statistics for South Africa are still focusing more on the banking sector. The reason being, most of their banking, the banking tools, banking sector is a bit more on the advanced stage compared to most of the African countries in sub-Africa. And therefore, most of these countries have intensified the use of digital payments. Yeah, so eventually, I think most businesses that are, or rather most of the components, like I highlighted under informal banking, are thriving very well. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Putty. So now I move on to Mark. Finally, you get the chance to tell us more about you and IPT Africa, which is headquartered in Mauritius and already has a very good reputation on the market.
Hi, Jessica. Good afternoon, everybody. Yep, thank you very much. So a little bit about ourselves and background. We were one of the founder members of the Mauritian African FinTech Hub, one of the founders of the kind of a Mauritian FinTech scene, and also Planet Africa. So we've been here for a while, and we've seen the last 5 years really the growth from absolutely zero in Mauritius to being, I wouldn't say a player, but certainly having an influence and a growing ecosystem. So we're very pleased. And I think today's event is the kind of culmination of a lot of people's hard work over the past couple of years. So onto the business, IPT Africa, we've kind of beta tested it in COVID, and we've actually really launched it really at the event itself. So what essentially we offer is we are a payment platform, but it's not aimed at the remittance market. Normally, when you look at Africa, there are many, many companies offering many solutions for globally the diaspora, moving their money back into Africa on mobile. But a huge undertapped market is actually global corporations. When they come to making payments in Africa, they face many issues. Normally, it's one of how do we actually make a payment into Ghana? How do we make a payment into Zambia? I'm in Canada, or I'm in Holland, and I have just purchased a large machinery or a large plant. I need to pay my employees. How do I do it? Traditionally, they would just send in hard currency via many banks, going through many different correspondent banking sectors and hope the funds turn up. We've changed that. From our platform, clients can access every single African currency live in local currency. So if you want to make a payment into Angola, if you want to make a payment into Kenya, you can do it and you'll get the local currency price. What that gives the client is control. So for the first time ever, they can actually see how much that transaction is costing them. And then they also can see it going through the local banking network. So their transaction fees become removed immediately. Now, if you're dealing with large corporations who are making lots of payments, that's really alluring to them. So for the first time, we've given them control over their payments. Another added feature is they can actually plug in mobile networks as well and mobile wallets. So I'll give you an example. If you have a corporate client who traditionally may be financing a large project in Kenya with a workforce of, say, 50 local Kenyans, again, traditionally, they would just pay the money into the local bank accounts on behalf of their employees. Their employees actually want to get paid in a mobile wallet. But how do we do that? It's a classic question. How do we do that? Easiest thing we can do is we just pay the money in and we leave it down to our employees to sort out how they get their funds onto their mobile wallet. We can plug in mobile wallets, so a corporation can now pay their workforce payroll directly onto the mobile wallets. So again, it's a value add for the in-country partner. So we see it as a big market. And in COVID, we've seen, as we said, we've been in beta testing, been extremely successful, dealing with a couple of large global payroll companies who are making payments throughout Africa. And we've streamlined their processes from 17 to 20 days down to 2 or 3 days. Full reporting, full transparency, and of course, huge cost savings. And we see that market continuing. We see, as we move out of COVID, the opportunities Africa present to global corporations are just going to continue to rise. And again, a lot of the pushback from corporations has been, how do we make payments into Africa? It's probably not worth us looking at these opportunities, because if I send money to Madagascar, it's never going to get there. Well, that's not the fact. You know, we can make payments in Madagascar and Ari live for the customer, and they see a same-day credit. So we just think we're going to be the conduit for global businesses looking to access the African payment space.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's very interesting and definitely disruptive. I think the question that I will have, the next question I will have to all of you is the title of this panel, which is Bloom or Gloom for the future, for digital payments and for your business specifically. So should we start with you, Putty, on this question and move to the rest of the panel? Putty, I think you're muted.
Okay. I did indicate earlier we launched last year, and having launched in the pandemic, one would think it won't be the easiest of times, or it was not the best time to do that. But to our surprise, it was taken up by storm. The reason being, everyone had to run to the digital sphere and see how best their businesses were going to strive, how they are going to continue banking, how they are going to continue saving and growing the money, how they are going to get their interest share outs at the end of the year, despite what happened. So to answer that question, I think I'll look at it twofold. As you mentioned, is it, I see boom or gloom in, within the next short term, how I look at it, both short term and long term. So I'll look at the gloom aspects, which are not many, but within the short term. And also referring to our current situation, having lived during the pandemic. So the gloom side of that we experienced at Saver and Remit, because we're more dependent on companies using the platform to trade, that's SMEs. We're also looking at people continuing to save and use our platform. But then the gloom side that has been noted from our angle has been that of liquidity issues in most companies, liquidity issues by most individuals. Some lost jobs and so on and so forth. And we as Save and Remit were equally affected because of one of those factors. And also during the COVID-19 pandemic, all countries were hit badly. the world at large, businesses were not really receptive to, and also it was also noted that most companies, also in SMEs, individuals were not really ready. The digital transformation was not ready for the huge transformation in the world at large. So most of the digital components were literally limited. They had not prepared themselves for what had come with the COVID pandemic. So those are just a bit of the issues that we noted. Not the businesses not thriving to their potential, but I think we had more of the bloom coming from it all. So the bloom side and what we've enjoyed as Save and Remit is that of there's been accelerated digital service use on the market, not only in Zambia, but also across the world. And also internet banking is also accelerated and transformed. There's been an increase in limits of transactions as opposed to what was there before. At least now you'd have huge sums of money being transacted. Limits had been lifted by the regulators in most countries, not only Zambia, to allow for people to transact more, to pay more for products and services, as well as for businesses, without them physically being or traveling to these places. And it has brought about less costs in terms of operations in most organizations. And also, at least everyone is able to work from everywhere they are. Thus, relying more on digital technologies and also digital payments. We also noted that through the digital payments, as well as through our interactions of Save and Remit with other businesses, is that there was an increase in the 10 years of loans, not only in the informal sector, but also the formal sector as well. This was to allow people more time, despite having maybe had salary cuts and so on and so forth, to also pay back in time, and at the same time have their interest paid on the amounts or the savings that they had actually saved. There was also where the commercial banks had also reduced the capitalization for the reserves for most of the banks. This was done mainly to allow for banks to actually, or rather to allow the local and international banks to have more revenue, or rather more money to be utilized for deposits, and also for the in and out transactions for the banks, as well as for mobile banking. Because ideally mobile banking and most of the digital platforms are so reliant on banks still, despite the increase in digital, despite the improved technology in the world. So the banks also had to tailor make themselves to suit the informal banking sector, as well as the digital payments aspect. So there was more of that collaboration with all platforms and with all companies to see how best businesses could thrive. Yeah. So there's more bloom than gloom in the business. Yes.
Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. So same question to you, Rahul, in terms of positives or negatives relating to digital payments generally, but also your business in the short term and longer term.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I think like for us, I think there's only bloom over here, right? From a digital payments perspective. And I'll give you some examples. So I think it was February, March when we started of 2020, when we started to hear about the COVID-19, pandemic, and South Africa went into lockdown on the 26th of March, 2020. And, we were quite apprehensive. We were like, okay, what's going to happen? There's total lockdown. What's going to happen to online volumes? And surprisingly, like in April 2020, from a digital perspective, we were flat. We had the same volumes as that we did in March, right? And then from May, things just exploded, right? So for Peach, for example, we saw customer acquisition, which is, businesses wanting to go online in South Africa and some markets that we operated, go up by 6 times from what it was in February to June, right? You could see certain sectors being impacted. So, travel, leisure, entertainment obviously took a hit, but there were other business areas that just exploded. So, data, ISPs, telcos, there was a huge demand for data services for people working from home. We saw grocery delivery, and in general, delivery of products and services explode on the market. And I think for us, what's been interesting to see over the past year or so has been, there was one question we had is, hey, is this temporary? And is this going to then subside once life is back to normal? And we haven't seen that. I think what's happened is there's been an acceleration of adoption of digital commerce by consumers across Africa. There were people who were apprehensive. Hey, I don't want to use my card online. I don't want to order online because I don't trust that I'll actually get this product. If I get it, is it going to be of the quality that I would go to the market and pick up, right? And I think people are tasting blood with the convenience of digital commerce. And that is a fundamental shift in consumer behavior that is not going back. And I think what it's done is it's created this whole new set of consumers who were apprehensive. If you think about the technology adoption curve, it's a bell curve, right? And you have the early majority and the early adopters and the early majority, then the late majority, and then the laggards. And I think we're already in the late majority over here. And what COVID did is accelerated that movement of that technology adoption curve. So from a Peach perspective, we are very bullish about digital commerce. I'll give you another statistic. In South Africa, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, these are some of the more advanced markets from an adoption of digital commerce perspective, right? In South Africa, online retail, and Worldwide Works, they did this research, is online retail is 2.8% of what total physical retail, total retail in the country is. Whereas compare that to the US or some of the more mature markets, it's over 15%. So even countries like South Africa, where you feel that, hey, there's a lot of digital commerce already, there's huge upside still available. And I think that's what you're seeing reflecting in the current fintech boom that we are seeing on the continent. There are startups like Chipper or Flutterwave or Paystack getting acquired by Stripe and Wave raising a ton of money. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to solve a lot of basic problems for consumers and for businesses on the continent. And the last point is, in Africa, we've always seen leapfrogging of technology adoption as well. So we never had a fixed line revolution, we went straight to mobile networks. Similarly, we are seeing a leapfrogging with its Momo or with these e-wallets like a Wave or Chipper, is that people are going to, in a way, leapfrog traditional banking. And that's where, as Putty said, people are looking for solutions that are more easily accessible, that are easier to use, that solve their basic needs. And I think that is the opportunity. So if as a business, you're focusing on some of these opportunities, in my view, it's the only way is up right now.
Thank you very much. I would agree with your analysis as well. It's the same thing in the fintech sector, wider sector than payments. Rahul, so same question to you, Mark, on the bigger picture, short term, long term, but also your business.
Trying to be positive, and I think I'll come at it from a slightly different angle. I think, again, having been in the sector for a while, I think Africa's time is now. Certainly from an investment point of view, just to date, there's been $3 billion worth of VC-funded ventures in Africa this year. Rahul's mentioned a few of them. It's a big number for Africa. 5-6 years ago, that number was probably 10, 15, 20 million. So there's constant money now flowing into Africa, certainly for fintech-backed ventures. And just the demographics of Africa. It is a growing continent. Some of the fastest growing economies in the world will be found within Africa. The demographics support a growing continent. And the leapfrogging, the lack of legacy issues, I think is really critical in digital payments. Europe or the rest of the world, we've had banks for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, legacy systems everywhere. Africa doesn't have that. So what you're seeing is New products coming out, new ways of delivering coming out, being backed by VC money, and it's very, very attractive. And we're already seeing that. As Rahul said, our volumes during COVID are up 30–40%, and these are clients trying to get ahead of the game for 2022 because deals are starting to be done in Africa, all across the continent, in all industries. And again, a stat, if you take somewhere like Ghana in 2012, there were 370,000 mobile wallets being used by the population of Ghana. 8 years later, it's 14 million. So you can see how very quickly, if you put the demographics of Africa with VC money and products that actually work, it's very, very scalable. And we just see that continuing. And that's where we're going to try and position our business using Mauritius, as we like to say, a helicopter view of Africa. We sit outside Africa, but we can offer a solution for our clients into every country in Africa. So we are very positive about the future.
Excellent. We're very happy to hear this, Mark, from Mauritius. So I've got another question for you about traditional banks. So with the digital payment revolution that you are all talking about, which clearly is working and booming, do you see a future for traditional banks? Mark?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think that there is for a reason. We still, at some point in the chain, unless you're in the world of crypto, but if you're in the traditional payments world, be it digital, and I think we've all mentioned it, a bank at some point has to get involved. But I think what Africa's seeing, and again, because you don't have these legacy issues, there's a bit of reverse engineering where products are coming to market, they're being backed by VC money, they're getting users very, very quickly. And then the banks are adapting to embed that technology and service that technology. So it's not really being led by the banks. I'd say it's actually the reverse. I'd say the technology providers and the fintech startups are coming up with solutions that the banks themselves want to service. And I think, Putty mentioned it as well. In Africa, it's always going to be that last mile delivery that's going to be the issue, certainly in the rural areas. So I think you're going to see some really innovative fintech companies coming out of Africa still offering solutions for that at some point that the banks will want to service.
Thank you, Mark. So Rahul, do you want to talk a little bit about challenger banks, their difference with traditional banks, and do you think that is the future of banking?
I think, if you see traditional, just to add to Mark's point a little bit, I think, what I see happening is traditional banks. I mean, every player plays a role in the value chain, right? And there's reasons why banks exist as a custodian of, consumer funds or as a store of value. And there's checks and balances, that exist. And as a fintech, I don't want to deal with the compliance overhead, right? So I think what you're hearing globally as well is, and you're seeing this with open banking or with, for example, MOCAS being set up in Mauritius. And, these are all steps towards the more banking as a service, right? So I think banks will, for us at Peach, for example, we work very closely with banks, right? And we don't want to do what banks do, certainly not everything. And we see them playing an important role and us playing a different role in the value chain that's at the end of the day together serves the customer. With neobanks and with the challenger banks, it's a fresh take at, what is the user experience? How do you go and sell to consumers? Do you need a branch? I remember back in the day, there was a concept around branchless banking, right? Like that's exactly what we're seeing happening with the digital banks. It's a fresh take on how do you build a bank from scratch? And then again, what are the problems you're solving for users and consumers? So I think there'll be a convergence at some point where traditional banks are also starting to launch products and services that address some of those needs. Neobanks will realize that there's more work to be done beyond just the front end and the user experience. And I think there will be a convergence. At the end of the day, I still see there's an opportunity for Africa is big enough, as Mark said, like 1.3 billion people growing at 2.5%, 60% of the population is below the age of 25, right, on the continent. That's a huge opportunity. So there's enough space, and I think we're going to see a lot more collaboration and a lot more partnering happening over here.
Thank you very much, Rahul. So, Putty, I will ask you a bit of a different type of question, so more of a personal one. So, for you, can you name the success story in digital payment in Africa or in the world? And you're allowed to say it's your company as well. That's why I say it's a very personal question. But can you tell us which one it is and why? I think you're, Putty, I think you're muted again.
Okay. I think I've got a number of success stories, but I'm trying to pick out one that has stood out for us as Save and Remit. We don't really have, on the Zambian market, we haven't really had a number of fintech companies taking up the challenge of banking the unbanked. And I can attest, during my days in the bank, not everyone is very confident to go into the banking sector, to actually go into a bank. And there are a lot of people out there in the remote areas with huge amounts of money from their businesses who resort to keep it home and not take it to the bank. Either one, maybe they have some self-esteem issues. And in our African setup, some people just find the banks a little intimidating. I've gotten that feedback during my research, and they've resorted to digital payments. You know, one thing that FinTech has done is it's brought banking or management of your money and resources to your doorstep. So they're agents and all these. So what we experienced as Save and Remit is we managed as a FinTech firm to tap into these areas, tap into, bring, the digital payment application that we have on our app through our aggregators gave so much confidence to our users, be it in villages, also in remote areas. They felt, like they have a bank in the midst. They don't necessarily have to go to the bank to have all their accounts, all their business statements, all their statements for their savings, in check. They literally have everything on their phone. So it was like we had somehow brought light into lives of many who are in the informal sector. We've also got insurance companies that have come on board where we're having a value-added proposition of how best we can actually save or rather service our clientele. We also have capital markets. Most business people have come up to us on how they can get advisory maybe information or even training on how they can manage excess funds that they haven't been able to utilize as SMEs or as individuals or as small saving groups. So in short, we as a FinTech company, though we're not we're not the biggest of them, where we started not in the recent past, we've actually been, I think we've played a part when it comes to deposits coming to in terms of the banks that we're actually related to. The reason being, we rely on banks for pool accounts, as the saying goes, and also answering one of the questions that Mark and Rahul had, or one of the things that they highlighted, the traditional banks still have that space, in the sphere.
I'm sorry, I'll have to interrupt you. Thank you very much. I will have to do the closing note. We've got 1 minute left. I would like to thank you all very much. It was a very practical, very interesting panel. And I will share the view of this panel that the future is bright. I think for the digital payment sector, that it will keep on blooming and disrupting for the greater good. So thank you very much. And I hope everyone who's listening enjoyed it as well.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.